What's up, 8th grade? Mr. Pastel here. Today I'm going to guide you through the first half of lesson 2.3. I thought that doing the whole lesson 2.3 is a bit much, so we're just going to do parts 1 and 2 today. But this lesson focuses on a new vocabulary word called speciation, which basically means creating new species. So, as we know, there are millions and millions of species on planet Earth. The question is, how did we get so many species? How did we get such a variety of species? And remember that the definition of species is that a species is kind of separated when it can only mate with itself. So even though two birds might look very similar, they only count as one species if they mate with each other. If they don't mate with each other, they're different species. So dogs are one species because they can interbreed. House cats are one species. But for example, a house cat and a bobcat, let's say, are two different species because they don't usually breed with each other. Anyway, let's get to the warm-up. So imagine that a population of frogs lives in the forest. The frogs have a green coloring for camouflage. Imagine that half this population stayed where they are in the forest, and the other half moves to the hills above the forest, which are drier with some brown grass and brown soil. First of all, why would they do this? Why would they move? Let's say that there was too much competition. Let's say the frog reproduced a lot in the forest. So a group of them are like, hey, I'm getting hungry. There's not enough food here. So I'm going to explore the surrounding territory. And maybe up on the hills, there's more food, like more bugs or something that they eat. So that could be a reason why the frogs kind of spread out. So now we have the ancestor population that started in the forest. Some of them stay in the green forest, the descendants, but some of them go to the brown hills. So they kind of separated. Which population of frogs is more likely to have changes after many generations? Do you think it's the one that went to the brown hill, the group that went to the brown hills, or the ones that stayed in the forest? Or do you think it's about equal? The question is, which species will change more? But these that are staying in the forest, they have no reason or pressure to change because they used to be in the forest, they're still in the forest. So changing would probably be bad for them because they're already adapted to the forest. Whereas these ones that went to the brown hills need to change because their camouflage doesn't work anymore. It's also probably a drier maybe it's a drier environment. I don't know. But I would say that descendant species 1 in the brown hills is going to change more. And you guys can help explain why. Let's go to part 2. So for this reading, I want everyone to read the introduction about speciation, like what is it? And then I want you to pick one of the 3 readings. But let's listen to the introduction first.
Where do species come from? Chapter 1, Speciation. Evolution is not just a thing of the past. It's happening all the time. That means new species are still evolving today. There are many ways in which species can evolve, but one type of evolution occurs when one species is divided into more than one population living in different environments. If these populations live in different environments for many, many generations, they may evolve so many differences that they are no longer the same species. What used to be populations of the same species become populations of different species. The process of one species evolving into two or more different species is called speciation. Speciation often starts when populations are separated by a barrier, such as a body of water or a mountain range. After they are separated, the populations don't encounter one another regularly anymore. They become separate populations, and over time they may evolve into different species. To learn more about some populations that were divided into very different environments and became different species, choose one of the chapters that follow.
Okay. So what this reading is basically saying is how do you make a new species? And one key is that basically you start with one population. And for some reason of separation, the original population is separated into two populations. And then over time, those two populations can become different, not breed with each other. So the separation can be a barrier, it can be water, it can be a mountain, it can just be space, it can be a lot of things actually, which we're going to explore. So you can choose between reading about Galapagos tortoises or polar bears, how they came to be, or flightless ducks that can't fly. You only have to do one of these, but basically, after you read about one of them, either the tortoises or the polar bears or the ducks. The first question is, how did the original population that became two descendant species first become separated? So that question is basically asking what caused the separation in the original population. Depends which article you're reading. Question 2. One of the populations had structures that changed over time. Describe the changes that happened and why they happened. So usually there's after the separation, there's one group that changed more. Usually it's the group that it's usually a smaller group that got separated from the bigger group. So how did they change? Why did they change? And lastly, why did the other population stay mostly the same? And the answer to that is probably similar to the frogs, probably because they mostly stayed in their original environment. So they stayed the same. They're already adapted to their environment. Whereas the new group that got separated up here changed because they had to adapt to a new environment because they got separated. Okay? And that is it for today. You only have to read the introduction in one of those readings. See you later.